Hey everyone, it's Oscar here bringing you another great episode of Life After Deportation, the podcast. In this podcast, we dive into the topic of life after deportation. So grab your headphones, turn it up, let's unwind together, and welcome to another episode of Life After Deportation. What's going on? Everybody? Welcome back to another great episode of Life After Deportation, the podcast. What's going on, guys? So, great episode today. How to thrive while being deported. Now, a lot of you guys might ask you guys, being deported may be the end of it. May seem that, you hit rock bottom and this is, you may think like, there's no way out of here. For many of us, that may be the case. We do think that way. Many times we think, being deported, it's like bottom of the barrel, where it's impossible to get out of. Now let me tell you, that's not the case. That's not the case. I like to look at being deported as a different perspective, a different angle, if you will, a different side, a different token, with God by my side, anything and everything is possible. So the way I like to look at it is deportation. It's like a second chance, second chance to rebuild what I started, or to rebuild the steps that what I did wrong. You know what I mean? While I was in the States, or wherever I was at. To me, being deported is like a second chance, a second opportunity to restart, to refresh, to rebuild, to recoup, and restart all over. Yeah, it sucks. You may not be where you may want to start over. You may want to start where the grass is already greener, but it's time to start watering your own grass now. You know what I mean? Start setting your own fertilizing, start setting your own water hose, water your own garden, if you will. Why? Because sometimes we just have to rebuild from the ground up. Now it's sometimes it's said easier. It's like I say, how to say, it's easier said than done. It sounds very easy to just to go ahead and grab and then rebuild from zero. It sounds easy, sounds amazing, right? But of course not. It's not easy. It's not glamorous. It's not. There's lonely nights. There's lots of cold nights where there's a lot of self-doubt. If what you're doing is right, or what you're doing is getting you somewhere, or where's the finish line. We all have those doubts of uncertainty, throughout the whole cycle of being deported, but you have to recoup and know exactly where you come from. One thing I like to it's emphasize is to do like a self check. Where you come from. What part of the states you were from. What did you do there? Not saying like what steps you took to get where the predicament you're in. No, but I'm saying it's like, who are you? Where do you come from? What's your environment? What are you good at? What did you learn from that environment? What did you learn? What can you learn? What did you learn that you can use now? And not only can you use now, but you can also encourage others to learn from your mistakes. Because mistakes are also opportunities, in disguise. You just have to find that opportunity, Now, one thing you also have to do with a self-check is, where are you going? Where do you want to be? If you're not liking the situation you're in right now, is where do you rather be at? How would you rather be living? If you're in the situation you're in right now, if you could change it, how would you change it? And how would you get there? So, things like that is where you have to reevaluate and see where you're at right now and do what you can with what you have. A lot of times we put a lot of stop to a lot of things because we always tell ourselves, well, if I had this, I could do this. If I was already in this situation, if I was in this position already, I would be able to do this and I would be able to do that. No, that's not true. The truth is do what you can with what you have right now. That's the truth. Why is because in reality there's a lot of things that you can do just with what you have right now. The rest will come later as you get the experience, as you get you know the levels, the experience, the blood, sweat, and tears. The rest will come with, and you'll be more seasoned and you'll be more prone to know exactly where you're getting into. You can't just jump from one to number five, just because you think you know it all. You have to go into levels. You know, um, those all these are self checks that you have to evaluate yourself. And after all, one thing I like to say is, when you were in the States, you used to chase the American dream. Everybody talks about the American dream, but nobody remembers what is the Mexican dream. Do have a Mexican dream. A lot of times we forget that the American dream came from the Mexican dream. From your family, your parents, your grandparents. However that lineage started, it all came from a Mexican dream. It wasn't the American dream. It wasn't. You know what I mean? Why? Because the Mexican dream is, if you realize it, is to own your own house, whatever it may be, a little ranchito, a house, an acre, half an acre, your own property basically, raise a decent God fearing family, you know, good children that are, God fearing kids that have manners, a good wife, a good spouse, a good career as well, a good career. Why not? If you don't have a career with a good trade, something that brings in the dough, and of course you can't forget, a few chickens too. We gotta eat too. But that's the Mexican dream. Now, like I say, guys, how do you thrive while being deported? It's like I say, it's easier said than done. How do you thrive? You just a lot of times, like I say, it's easier said than done. But you just gotta get up and go. You just gotta get up and go. If like me myself, I think my mother that raised me in a Christian home and that had taught me to always run to Jesus whenever I feel him down or despair. And not only times when I feel down, but also when I feel good about the situation I'm in. And one thing that helped me out a lot when I was deported, my first few days, couple months, weeks, years of being deported, and it still helps me to this day, is actually, closing the door, going into my prayer and talking to God, talking to Jesus about what's next, or, or to give me strength, or give me guidance, give me wisdom. Because, to be honest with you, being deported does not come with a manual. It doesn't. No one tells you this is that, this is where you gotta go, this is where you gotta go. You gotta meet this person, talk to this person, then you gotta do this. Nobody tells you that. They just tell you welcome home. You know what I mean? So, it's like I said, how do you thrive while being deported? You just gotta go to Jesus, ask for strength, ask for wisdom, and you just gotta pick up yourself and go. You gotta. What do you had in the States? What you didn't have? Okay, you were lacking your driver's license. You had lacking a ID. You had a fake ID. Okay, now you're Mexican. Now you don't have an excuse. You can get your driver's license now. You can get your ID now. You know what I mean? How do you get that? You get your paperwork first. Your birth certificate, your social security number. First, you establish your identity, to get your paperwork started. You know what I mean? You're in your own home country. Why not get your driver's license? Why not get your ID now? Now that you're a legal Mexican citizen, what's stopping you now? Now in the States, say you were working a 9 to 5 and it was a dead end job and you wanted to go to college. Well, now you're in your home country. What's stopping you? Yeah, there's a lot of gaps and like a lot of employers don't hire because you have to be in a certain age group between 20 to 35. Who cares? Who cares? If they don't open that door for you, you create your own lane. You know what I mean? You create your own lane and build different positions for other people like you. You know, it all starts with you. You know, don't wait for someone to open the door for you or to pave the lane for you. You know, be that generational curse breaker. You know, be that stigma breaker. You know, break those stigmas. You know. Now, going back to that, say you had a 9 to 5 or you had a good career going on, whatever the case may be. You know, you can still start. You can still continue what you were doing in the States. You can continue what you're doing in Mexico as well. You know, there's nothing different. You were an entrepreneur. You were into real estate. You had your own business. You know, whatever the case may be, you can do it here. Of course, it's different. You know what I mean? You still got to deal with your permits, different market, different customers. You know what I mean? Different customer habits, different ways of dealing with customers. You know, the whole market changes absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you're a seller, you're gonna sell no matter where you're at. You know, if you're a hustler, you're gonna hustle no matter where you're at. So it all comes down to is being who you are, checking in who you are. You know, a lot of things that helped me out too, man. Is one thing that I told myself when I was deported, when I got fired from my first job, well, the first position at Vista, because I was selling left and right, but if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. You know what I mean? And I was just all I cared was about just bringing in the paycheck, And unfortunately, because I discovered a formula to get unlimited commissions. But anyways, that's not the point. That's not the point, all right? The point is, when I knew I was going to get fired, I told myself, if I'm a seller, I'm going to sell bubble gums on the corner of the street, and I'm going to be the best seller no matter where I'm at. Even if I'm selling Porsches or if I'm selling bubble gum, I'm going to be the number one salesman. You know what I mean? That's the mentality you have to put yourself to. You have to know, you have to put yourself into that position where, like, if look, not to be selfish, but if so and so can make it, why not you? You know what I mean? That's sometimes where you have to do it. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you gotta be like, man, I'm smarter than that too. If they can do it, I can do it too. Why not? So you have to put in that predicament where you're gonna accomplish it. You got this. You may not know how to do it, but you have to put yourself in that position where, like, nah, I got this and I'm gonna do it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just have to put that into your perspective, and it will ignite something within you. Just don't give up on yourself. That's one of the things I tell, especially when I conversate with my wife. Whenever she tells me, hey babe, I wanna try this career, I wanna switch careers, I wanna try a different career, and I'm like, yeah, go for it, let's do it. At the end of the day, what's gonna tell you? Someone's gonna tell you no, but let them tell you no. At least you try. Self-doubt, and we deny ourselves before we even try. So that's what we had to do is, don't deny ourselves. You have to go ahead and give your shots. Like I said, it's easier said than done, because sometimes we just feel like we may be embarrassed. You know what I mean? That we just may sound dumb selling ourselves, or, trying to present ourselves, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you just, coming into the market brand new with no sponsors, no one to back you up. You know what I mean? It's tough. One of the ways to, thrive while being deported is to have a positive mindset. Yes, you're gonna feel down. Absolutely, you're gonna have a lot of situations where you just don't have nobody. You know what I mean? Like when we first got here, my brothers don't have anybody. My mom didn't have anybody. All my family was, deeper down south Mexico. So it wasn't, we're just like a phone call away, but it wasn't like we had someone next door to come to. And a lot of people that are being deported right now, or that have been deported, are being separated from their families as well, without knowing what fate comes after this. Are they gonna see their kids? Are they gonna see their loved ones again? Will they be reunited? Are they gonna be okay? Are they gonna be, earning a decent living to maintain both households? Because sometimes that's what you gotta do. You still, as the man of the house, sometimes you gotta take care of the house, even though you're not even living at home. You know what I mean? And at the same time, you still have to take care of yourself here in Mexico, in your own land, your own country, while also trying to juggle the other household. You know what I mean? And those are type of battles that you're gonna face. The one that we face. While being deported. Another dilemma is the uncertainty if you're ever gonna see your kids again. If unfortunately, if you didn't, whatever the case may be, I don't know. I just pray to you guys, because I know a very, very, very close relative of mine, very, very close, that unfortunately became a product at that deportation, where he has not been able to see his kids or even heard of his kids for over 10 years. So I can just imagine the pain, the frustration one can go through, not knowing anything of their children since the day they got deported. You know what I mean? So those are the type of battles that you may be facing as well. Or you may be thinking of, what's gonna happen if I get deported? What's gonna happen if I get caught? One thing is for sure, though, is that no matter how strong the battle is on your side, is that, like I said, guys, it's easier said than done. But I had to tell you guys, you don't fight those battles alone. You have God next to you. 24/7, 365, God's always there with you. Like I said, it's easier said than done. But there's something about when you just get on those knees and you pray behind closed doors and you just let it all out. It's a whole different level. You know, but that's one of many things, guys, that you have to know what you're gonna face. If you want to thrive while being deported, you got to know what punches are going to come ahead. You have to know what's coming, because the worst is never the worst. But you also have to know what's coming. Yeah, you've been deported. You already know you're not going to see your family when you get off from work. You already know that. How are you going to deal with it now? How you plan on taking care of that? How are you going to cope with that? How are you still going to be a father or a mother while not being there? You know what I mean? Those are the choices that you have to take. You know what I mean? And decisions that you have to do, while being deported. One of the things is that, that you have to do while being deported, if you want to thrive, is to take action and not procrastinate. I mean, a lot of us want to procrastinate. I know we're all tired. I know we want to sleep in. I know we'd rather not do what we had to do because we'd rather just relax. And I get that. Sometimes we do need to relax. Sometimes we do need to sit back and enjoy an extra cup of coffee. You know what I mean? Or an extra something, whatever it is your choice is. But sometimes we do need that little extra, But at the end of the day, procrastination, 1 minute leads to 5 minutes, 5 minutes leads to 10 minutes, and you already know the deal. You already know what goes after. So one thing about thriving while being deported is taking action when you need to take action. When you gotta do something, you gotta do it now, because not only tomorrow's not promised, but it's better to take care of what you have to take care of now than to do it later. How does that work while being deported? Well, may not apply right now, to be honest with you, but it will be applicable later on. I bet you anything it will be. Well, yeah, guys, without further ado, guys, I hope this little mini podcast of life after deportation can help anybody out, help somebody out, give a little word of encouragement of what to expect while, being deported or while you're gonna be going through the whole deportation process. I keep you guys all my prayers. I know we're going through tough times right now. I know the whole Hispanic communities in all different parts of California or the parts of the United States, are being devastated by different rates, and I pray for you guys are safe keeping, I pray for you guys, and, Mexico welcomes you guys with open arms. This is the new land opportunity. Welcome home, guys, and don't be afraid to start new. Don't be afraid to start fresh, and don't be afraid to start from nothing. Rebuild, start from zero, work yourself up there. You got this. With Jesus on your side, nothing's impossible. All right. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. All right. And I hope you guys thrive while being deported. All right. So take care, guys. Life after deportation. God bless. If you'd like more information on how to contribute or would like to share your deportation story, please reach out via email to deportedintj@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and to our other platforms like YouTube so we can continue encouraging that there is life after deportation. Oh, in Jesus' name, let's go.